Hello, this is Charisse. This is my presentation for the July 2014 Teach Now cohort, Module 2, Unit 2, Activity 3, Laws and Regulations that Affect Teaching. The topics I will be discussing are IDEA, Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title 6, and No Child Left Behind, 2001. I will elaborate on certain parts and I will say how it will affect teachers locally, state, globally, yes, and globally. Oh, and nationally. First, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 2004, IDEA. IDEA. It's the predecessor of the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, also known as EAHCA, EHA, or Public Law PL 94-142. EAHCA requires all public schools accepting federal funds to provide equal access to education and one free meal a day for children with physical and mental disabilities. It was enacted by U.S. Congress in 1975. It requires schools to provide administrative procedures so that parents of disabled children could dispute decisions made about their child's education. It allows disabled students to be in class with non-impaired students, except in situations where the disability interferes with instructional goals and cannot be achieved in the regular classroom. It also ensures that special education services are available. Now, IDEA is a spending class legislation. This means that it only affects states and local educational agencies that accept federal funding under IDEA. States that decline the funding are not subject to IDEA at all. The purpose is to provide FAPE, which is free, appropriate public education that prepares them for further education, employment, and independent living. Services should be designed to meet the unique learning needs of eligible children with disabilities. That's what IDEA is for. Say, locally, as far as I can see, this state, Maryland, does follow follow the rules and everything, have everything accessible to special needs children. Nationally, this is good, but since it's only a spending clause legislation, not everybody's going to do it. Globally, internationally, it depends. In my experience, overseas teaching, there are the special needs children are in the class with regular children, but they also have their own classroom for certain subjects. So I taught English; they would come in there for English with me, and if for certain subjects they go to their own classroom. I'm not quite sure because I only saw them for my time. Some other schools, I don't know if they had their own classroom, but they had a person who was with them, their aide who was with them. International schools, they probably have a more in-depth program for them, but because mainly because they're international schools, so they have stateside regulations also, depending on which state they're affiliated with. Next is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title 6. Title 6 covers the education, progress, and activities. No, education programs and activities. The Civil Rights Act outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. It ended unequal application for voter registration, and it also ended racial segregation in schools, at the workplace, and in public accommodations. This is a this act helped, well, since now America has always been really mixed, so now that allows everyone to be in the classroom together instead of segregated. Programs that receive ED funds must operate in a non-discriminatory manner. ED is United States Department of Education. So programs receiving education funds, they must operate in a non-discriminatory manner. That includes admissions, recruitment, financial aid, academic programs, student treatment and services, counseling and guidance, discipline, classroom assignment, grading, vocational education, recreation, physical education, athletics, housing, and employment. The Office of Civil Rights, OCR, is responsible for enforcing Title VI as it applies to programs and activities funded by the Education Department. Some examples of what OCR is in charge of, like the failure of some school districts to provide equal education to students with limited English proficiency. There are higher education places that have separate college facilities for students based on race, color, and national origin. And there's the discriminating assignment of minority students to classes designed for students who are mentally disabled or handicapped. This law right here, not a lot of people follow it, even though it's a law. Not people do not follow it because they have it under the people who get education funds, which I'm pretty sure was everybody, but not everyone gets it. There are still places where they have minority children, especially African American children, put in special needs, special education classes, even though they don't need special education. I just think it's the teacher's not doing enough, may not be doing something that helps the children learn more. Now, for No Child Left Behind, I got a bit of information on this one. No Child Left Behind 2001 is a reauthorized ESEA to close the achievement gap with accountability, flexibility, and choice, so no child is left behind. Schools have to report progress of minority children, children with disabilities, children with limited English proficiency, and children from low-income families. The information on the performance of the schools must be available to anyone that is interested and include the children's subgroups. Now, the people who look at that information are teachers, parents, real estate agents, superintendents, school boards, and there's even industries who look at this information to see if they want to place new facilities there. Teachers look up this information to see if they even want to teach there. Parents, if they want their children going to that school. Real estate agents, so they have the information for parents who ask about the schools. Now, the No Child Left Behind this law affects many in public school, teachers, special education schools in the nation. Now, how this affects teachers. The teacher must be able to assess children and how to use those results to plan more effective instruction. If one method doesn't work, they must think of other ways to help reach them. The teachers must be able to use research-based teaching methods, meaning they must look up research, more teaching methods, and look at that research and see how it worked for that class and try it on their class. If it works, keep at it. Teachers must have the skills to teach many levels of students. Some teachers are able to do that. Some teachers need more training in how to do this. But some schools that don't have enough funding are not able to give their teachers training on this. But teachers can pay for it out of pocket for more training, but it gets expensive, and sometimes you may need time off to do that. Now, for special education, this affects special education too, because they have to get those children to be able to make higher scores on their tests, because those test scores count. But each child has an IEP. IEP is Individualized Education Plan, designed to fit the child's learning needs. Not every child's not going to have the same thing or learn at the same rate, so that affects it a lot too. Now the schools that continually don't meet goals are put into needs improvement, corrective action, and restructuring. Now this can happen to good schools too, because sometimes the teachers are giving in a meeting and they are just giving this new rules and this new curriculum, and then they have to teach to that new curriculum without any training whatsoever. They're just thrown into it, and by the time they get used to it, the tests already happened and they're not doing that well, and they get put into these categories when it's actually not their fault, because there was no training whatsoever, no real warning. Now, how does this affect the nation? Well, it's been proven that when the nation invests in a quality education, there is higher growth and productivity, with a stronger economy and a successful civil society, which pretty much means better quality of life all around. But like Finland 40 years ago, they didn't have very good education structure, and they changed it to where everything's better. They changed it to where they focus on the students more, and the teachers are put to the level of same as doctors and lawyers. Um, and education is everything is state funded. It's not government funded, it's state funded. So everything's paid for. Your school, teachers, masters, everything. You pay a little bit higher taxes, but just about it. But everything's funded, and they have been continually on the top of the international scoring charts. But basically, the No Child Left Behind, what it basically does, it makes public schools compete for federal money using tests and other methods to measure the teachers and students, which is not good, because these scores can be skewed very much, especially if they have English language learners and they don't know English that well. And so the English language learners that are very proficient in English, they take the test, while the lower proficient students are actually marked absent or sent somewhere else, like to say they were marked absent, to skip the test that makes the scores be higher. Also, that's pretty much some schools do that. Of course, if they offer the test in that student's native language, the scores will probably be higher either way. But some schools say it's too much trouble or too much money to do that, so they just say just send the student somewhere else or just mark them as absent that day. And that will complete. Here are my sources for all the information. I should go over how these laws will go over nationally. Nationally, we do higher education, think more about the students and help the teachers out, and stop competing for money to make your school look better. I think the test scores will speak for themselves because I think they will go higher and higher as we help the children and the teachers in education groups. Um, Locally, I don't see that being done. State-wise, with these laws, most of them, the ones I discussed, they're only apply to ones that are funded by certain organizations like education organizations, and the ones that are not, that it doesn't apply. So, yes, especially No Child Left Behind. They say it's doing well, but it's not because actually there are states that are lowering their standards to make it look like they're doing what they're supposed to do. But that's not going to work because then that makes students not prepared for when they graduate for higher education in life. Um, how would it work globally, internationally? Globally, in certain areas, most countries that I know of have their own set of rules for education. They have their own ways. International schools may be a little bit different because certain international schools are affiliated with American schools, so they probably have an American curriculum by certain states. Like the one in China, one is I'm working for. They're with California, so California kindergartens. They're affiliated with them, so they do their type of education, which is which prepares them for life when they're older. The other laws don't really apply to stuff like that. Like Korea has a sort of No Child Left Behind, but theirs is completely different from ours. In Korea, from my experience in teaching elementary school there, they are passed by age. They are not passed by their academic ability. So when you're 5, 6, and when you get older, school year's over, you go to the next grade no matter what your academic ability is. So the kids that were already struggling are struggling more, and they decide eventually just tune out certain parts of school because of this. And that's why there's many vocational schools and hagwons, which are little private schools to do extra instruction. But they're very, very expensive. So if you're in a lower socioeconomic class, you're not getting to that hagwon. So you're trying to just left to do whatever, and you're possibly going to vocational school because grades are pretty much everything there. Your test scores are pretty much everything that decides when you get out of elementary school. Your test scores decide on what middle school you go to. Your middle school test scores decide on what high school you go to, and then your college, and what job you have. What school you go to, if it's a well-known school, that decides if you get a job or not too. But yeah, here, not so much. On the international places, I'm not sure because I don't have much experience with them, and I would look up information, but it's in that native language, and I don't know it. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening. The end.